Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, and distinguished guests, for being here with us. We will now begin our high-level dialogue. And the high-level dialogue will consist of a keynote address and then move on to the discussions with our moderator. Before we begin, I would like to invite our keynote address speaker. Please welcome to the stage Director General Chu Dong-yu of the FAO for his keynote speech. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so delighted to speak to you again. And the world faces a big challenge linked to the degradation of our natural resources, the intensified climate crisis, biodiversity loss, growing food insecurity, and socio-economic downturn due to the COVID-19 pandemic, among others. We must overcome the challenges, and we can, by creating green, healthy, and resilient future with the forestry is one of the solutions. And sustainable forest conservation, management, and restoration is the key. You know, I'm a son from the mountains and in China. So when I was a kid, I always climbing my small mountains and I found the mushrooms in the spring and catch a fish in the small rivers. That's some kind of things that we still remember from my life, and now after I left my hometown about 50 years. So I think the natural forest and give you a lot of natural touch. We have made some progress on the forestry, as President Moon mentioned, especially in this part of the world, put a lot of effort to plant the trees, billions and billions. Korea, Japan, China, India, you name it. I think the world, I think last year they have some scientific publication, the scanning the greener of this part of the world. It's contributed more than 60% of greener during past decades. And we have made some progress, as I said. We saw the important commitment at the UN Food Summit and the COP26. This Congress is a unique opportunity to scale up the action to match this commitment. Political willingness is the number one, but most of us here today, we should offer the package of professional solution to support the political commitment. To support and guide this action, today FAO is launching the new report on the state of the world forestry 2022, forestry and the green recovery, building inclusive and sustainable green economy. The report presents 3 mutually reinforcing pathways to achieve the sustainable health and forestry. The first pathway is the halting or stopping, if possible, and deforestation and maintaining forestry. From 2015 to 2020, 10 million hectares of forest are lost or degraded each year. This has driven climate change. Halting the deforestation could cut the greenhouse gas emissions by 14%, a significant contribution to keeping the global temperature rising to the 1.5 degrees Celsius. And at the same time, we could safeguard more than half the Earth's terrestrial biodiversity. Second pathway is restoring degraded land and expanding agroforestry. 1.5 billion hectares of degraded land can be restored. Restoring just 350 million hectares could deliver trillions of dollars in ecosystem services. Increasing tree cover could boost the agricultural productivity on another 1 billion hectares. I should pass my experience 10 years about in the Ningxia autonomous regions, which only 200 millimeter rainfall and very drought areas surrounded by the desert. Sometimes we have to plant tree, but more important, we have to plant the grass and some herbal species, because that helps restore ecosystems and then bring all the improvement of soil erosion first, anti-desertification first. That's very important. Not only plant big trees. If the rainfall more than 400 millimeter rainfall in a year, it's better plant trees. But if less than 400 millimeter rainfall, please start to plant grass and bushes. That's a scientific solution. The third, I think that's crucial also, as agricultural production must increase 50% by 2050 to meet the growing food demand. So the third pathway is to sustainably use the forest and build green value chains. That will help meet the future demand for materials and underpins sustainable economies. Using sustainable wood in construction, for example, can store the carbon while they're building a more resilient local economy. Smallholders, local communities, and indigenous people who are managing nearly half of the world forestry and farmer landscapes are crucial for scaling up implementation. Some 33 million people, that is 1% of global employment, are estimated to work directly in the formal and the informal forest sectors. 1/3 of the world population, about 2.6 billion people, rely on wood and other traditional fuels for household and cooking. Of course, we had also close cooperation with the International Institute for Renewable Energy and produce all the possible renewable energy from solar energy, wind energy, and also for biomass. From biomass to biogas. That's also another circular economy which helps us reforest and also to solve the problem of a shortage of energy for the rural areas. So we have to offer a package solution, a systematic way, coherent way, and jump out of our box, only focus on forest itself. Wild harvest the forest food, added to the food security and nutrition of people living near the forest, especially in the remote area, in the tropical and subtropicals, who also earn a quarter of their incomes from forests. That's what I said, because we don't have enough nutrition. We pick our own mushroom early morning. So that's the only way to survive. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the world to invest in our forests, politically, financially, and technologically. In that aspect, especially here, I met my friend from GCF, Yannicka. He's also appreciated, hosted by the government of and the people of Korea. And we are one of the close partners for FAO, plus GEF, of course. So financially, for this three pathway must at least triple by the 2030 to meet the climate, biodiversity, and land degradation neutrality targets. This includes new investments through the Climate Financial Green Recovery Program and the private sectors, reoriented incentives for agriculture producers, which stand at least $540 billion each year, can make a big difference. Forests and agriculture can mutually support each other. Over 20 developing countries have shown it possible. Restoring and sustainably managing forests and trees call for up-to-date and reliable data for effective and appropriate decision-making. Tomorrow, FAO will unveil the results of our remote sensing survey, a wide-range collaborative study involving 800 national experts from the 126 countries, analyzing 430,000 samples as a complement to the FAO 2020 Global Forest Resource Assessment. Dear colleagues, healthy and thriving forests means healthy and thriving society and economy, and partnerships will be the key to success. We need to break out the silos. We need to work together to transform our agri-food systems to be more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable. And we must ensure that the agri-food system transformation and the forest protection and restoration and the sustainable management go hand in hand, because we are one of the part of the ecosystem. So we have to look the holistic way to address the issues and to find a package of solutions to play each role by your own part. FAO is strengthening its work with the government, private sector, academia, local communities, women, and youth. Together we can unlock the full potential of forestry to achieve the better production, better nutrition, better environment, and better life for all living on behalf. Please, deep thinking with your concrete suggestions, and then I will try my best to bring all your recommendations to the highest politicians for their consideration. That's my role. I'm willing to cooperate with all of you for the better future by the better forestry. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Director General, for your keynote address. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will invite to the stage our panelists for the first part of our discussion, which will be titled Challenges of the Global Community. So with that, please welcome to the stage our moderator and panelists for the first talk. Mr. Juan Carlos Jintiak, Ms. Ugranta Srivastava, excuse me for the pronunciation, Mr. John A. Perota, and Mr. Yannick Glemarek, please come up to the stage, as well as our moderator, Professor Jie Sun. And please welcome them with a big round of applause. So now that our panel discussants and our moderator are seated, I would just like to briefly introduce our moderator to you. She's Professor Jie Sun, and she's currently an invited professor at Ewha Women's University. She also consults on communication strategies for major international organizations such as the World Bank and the Asia Foundation. And with that, I turn the floor over to Professor Sun.
Thank you. Everything works, yes. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our high-level dialogue on building a green, healthy, and resilient future with forests. As introduced, my name is Sun Jie. I will be moderating today's session and tomorrow's session in the afternoon about sustainable wood. I am very pleased to be a part of this, this movement. Director General Chu voiced it very clearly, better future, better forests. So I think that is something that we are all trying to achieve. This session will actually focus on two fundamental questions. What needs to be done in the forest-relevant or forest-related areas in order to achieve the SDGs by 2030, and also how and to what extent has the pandemic changed our understanding of sustainability and what needs to be done differently in the post-COVID world. We will be discussing these issues in two consecutive panels, and the first panel, as you see, is seated here. But our first speaker video is actually not here in person, but the first representative is from the World Bank. He is Mr. Jürgen Vogel, Vice President for Sustainable Development, who oversees the work of global practices and thematic groups on various areas of the sustainable development area. Mr. Vogel has sent us a video message outlining the World Bank's perspectives on what needs to be done in the forest-relevant or forest-related areas in order to achieve SDGs by 2030. I believe we have a video. Let us listen to his message. First off, could you roll the video, please?
I'm pleased to join you today at this high-level dialogue on building a green, healthy, and resilient future at the World Forestry Congress. Today, the world faces multiple crises. We see how COVID-19 has threatened important development gains at the same time that we face climate and biodiversity crisis. And of course, the war in Europe is on top of all this that's happening already. And these crises affect poor people the most. Roughly 3.3 to 3.6 billion people live in places that are highly vulnerable to climate change. Our analysis shows that climate change could push as many as 130 million people into poverty by 2030 and cause over 200 million people to migrate by 2050. And the risks from nature loss are equally dire. A loss of ecosystem services such as pollination, provision of timber from tropical forests, food from marine fisheries could reduce the GDP growth of low-income countries by up to 1/3. And it could mean that growth in lower middle-income countries will be 20% lower than it would be otherwise. In the meantime, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to have devastating health and economic consequences, especially in developing countries. In 2020, extreme poverty rose globally for the first time in over 20 years. Because of the pandemic, around 100 million people were pushed into extreme poverty. Without doubt, we need to ensure that recovery packages address the COVID-19, yes, the climate crisis, but also the biodiversity challenge together. Current patterns that erode natural capital and deplete forests, oceans, and other natural assets become more costly every day, and the poor bear most of these costs. To achieve the SDGs by 2030, we do need a coordinated response that targets socioeconomic, climate change, and biodiversity challenges together and invests in natural capital, such as forests. As we support developing countries to respond to these crises, we should work to help them recover in ways that are more sustainable, more inclusive, and more resilient to future shocks, to avoid trading off long-term loss for short-term gain. At the World, we call this green, resilient, and inclusive development, or GRID. The GRID approach supports people, the planet, and the economy in an integrated manner that is tailored to a specific country need and to its objectives. It sets a path that achieves lasting economic progress that is shared across the population, providing a robust recovery and restoring the momentum on the Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, forests have an important role in GRID. Beyond its core SDG, life on land, forests are key to achieving many other SDGs, from reducing exposure and vulnerability of the poor to climate-related extreme events, protecting and restoring water-related ecosystems, to achieving the sustainable management and efficient use of natural resources. So addressing these multiple crises together is the key. It's essential to preserve the development gains achieved over the recent decades and to help communities build a sustainable future. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to learning the outcome of your discussions at the World Forestry Congress.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vogel, for providing such insights. I think you have outlined very many broad subjects, but I think what I've here is the coordinated efforts that needs to be done in various aspects. And I think that is sort of what we have here in terms of our representatives from various sectors who are actually with us at the Congress. Let's start off with Mr. Juan Carlos Hinitec, Technical Advisor to the Indigenous Organizations of the Amazon Basin. It's a global alliance of, and Global Alliance of Territorial Communities. He served as a coordinator of international economic cooperation, autonomous indigenous development for COICA. You have a very unique perspective, I believe, in terms of what we need to do in order to achieve the SDGs by 2030 forest relevant and forest relevant areas. Could you tell us what your perspective is?
Hola. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for your question. As was introduced, I am working at COICA. There are many colleagues from this organization, and also there are many organizations that are related to forests. And together with these colleagues, COICA has been working to carry out various activities at the regional level. And we are trying to make sure that our roles are played out properly, and we also focus on collecting data as well. We understand the importance of forests as we live in the countries and regions where forests provide the foundation for our society and economy, and we benefit from forests. There are so many benefits we've been enjoying from the forests, and these have been benefiting the indigenous people. And there are multinational organizations such as UNFAO, and these organizations have been our partners in coordinating our efforts so that we can continue to maintain an integrated approach. We need to respect each other. Now, let me think about carbon. Carbon is, of course, an important topic, but we need to have a holistic perspective. And with such a holistic perspective, we need to design and implement various initiatives. So together with our brothers and sisters in the region, we need to discuss various proposals and suggestions. And we also need to forge strategic partnerships with local communities and local governments. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your pointing out how important the forestry-related sectors to the indigenous people. Do you think there is a specific role that maybe the indigenous people should play in the future of forests?
Totalmente. Nosotros, los pueblos indígenas, hemos dicho.
Well, for our indigenous people, this is our message for the international community. We have our protocols and we have our rights within the land that we live in. We are faced with crisis itself. We have forest fires degrading the forest that we are living in. This is something that we are experiencing quite directly in our lives. And so the indigenous communities should utilize their governance structures. And that is a right that we have. We need to make sure that our rights and opinions are reflected by the international community. If they do not pay attention, then there will be severe degradation of forests, and the crisis that we are faced with are challenges that are faced by the global community. So we need to cooperate now.
Yes, I think you have emphasized the need for the action that is really needed at the moment, not something that we can push to the future. And I think that is something that will be addressed, especially by the youth contingency. We have Ms. Igrata Srivastava, the Youth Task Force UN Decade and Youth Constituency focal point to the UNEP. Just a little explanation about our youngest participant. She has been nominated India's Green Girl, and she's addressed, was dressed a 100 world leaders at the 2009 United Nations Summit on climate change in New York when she was 12 years old. She's much older now, and so she's with us to talk about her perspectives on what needs to be done in the forest-related sector.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it is always an honor to speak after such great leaders, especially my brother from the indigenous community here. And it's an honor to address this plenary here. I am, as mentioned, Yug Ratna from the youth organization Plan for the Planet. And I currently serve as in a 3-year mandate for elected focal point for the Major Group for Children and Youth on environment governance. I would like to begin by congratulating the organizers for convening this Congress here, and also for the support that has been provided to young people across all regions to actually come and travel and participate in the Congress in Korea. Young people, through various regional and global consultations led by the youth constituency, have designed the WFC Youth Declaration. At this high-level dialogue, we call upon the whole Congress to recognize the WFC Youth Declaration as one of the key outcomes of this Congress and heed to its recommendations. For children and youth, protecting the forests is a matter of justice between generations and people. Failure to implement sustainable forest management will directly impact vulnerability of more than 1.2 billion people, almost 50% of which are women, including young women. This is about us, and it cannot be without us. Excellencies, if billions of dollars can be mobilized in the name of military and defense, then we ask you that you mobilize finances for young people, for youth engagement, and finances that protect people and planet and not destroy people and planet. Put resources on the table where it matters. Put resources in the hand of smallholder farmers, in the hand of small startups, in the hands of community-based organizations. Children and youth organize in different manners globally, right from community-based organizations to grassroots movement to international and regional networks. They often do not have offices. A lot has been talked about challenges. Young people don't have resources to accredit themselves to the UN. So the UN has to go and meet young people. And we remind you, when you tokenize young people, it is not just the young people that suffer. It is actually the institutions that tokenize young people that suffer the most. We ask that you include youth voices by mandate and not by invitation only. We can talk about facts and figures, the strides achieved in the past years, or the numbers by IPCC, or the review of SDG 15 underway at this year's high-level political forum and the expert group meetings, and what has to be done in order to implement the outcomes of the Glasgow Pact or many other such landmarks. But the fact is clear. As the world commemorates Stockholm Plus 50 this year, 50 years since the 1972 conference, we just do not have time. We do not have time to wait until the next Forestry Congress to meet again to talk about how are we going to save the world's forest. The time for action is now. So we urge you, as this high-level dialogue is meant to set the tone for the rest of the Congress, that when the sessions happen, whether those are special sessions or parallel events, we want you to urge to think that are those discussions intergenerational? Are the young and future generations' perspective being reflected? And are those discussions truly youth inclusive? That will determine the true success of this Congress. In my conclusion, I would like to mention that in the coming months, young people and youth constituencies are convening a series of youth-led forums and discussions, among which the Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Environment Assembly that will be held in Sweden in the beginning of June, end of May, leading up to series of moments convened just before intergovernmental meetings, but also decentralized consultation, and we urge you to work with them. If it is not meaningful, it is not youth engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. I think your talk is more than enough argument for the fact that we really do need to include the voices of the youth in our discussions about future and the future of forests, as well as giving not only the voice, but actually allocating resources so that the voices can actually have impact in the policies that we forge. And I do echo her call that we do take into consideration that, you know, the future generation is not just on paper, but actually the future generation that we see here today and will actually carry on the world that we leave behind. So that is a very wonderful and inspiring speech, followed by Dr. John Perrotta, the president of the International Union of Forest Research Organizations, who's also the National Research Program leader for the International Science Issues with the USDA Forest Services. Dr. Perrotta, how do you see what needs to be done to achieve the SDGs by 2030, especially in the forest-related areas?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Professor Sohn. Well, first off, I'd like to express my gratitude to the Korean Forest Service and FAO for their absolutely outstanding efforts in organizing this Congress under such difficult circumstances. I know it's not been easy. You know, considering the fundamental issues that we're addressing during this Congress, I can't think of any better place to be holding this event, you know, and finding ways for the global community to build a green, healthy, and resilient future through forests. The people of Korea, as we've heard many times already today, have already shown us the way. Their efforts, I think, are very, very important to the reasons behind the successful efforts of the Republic of Korea to succeed in large-scale forest landscape restoration are worth noting and taking to heart. It was the grassroots commitment throughout the country, as well as policy coordination among a variety of sectors that really made this possible. So I think that's an important lesson for us all. Now this Congress provides a crucial opportunity for diverse audiences within our forestry sector to share our knowledge, experiences, and ideas for how to move ahead constructively. I believe that through this dialogue, we have the opportunity to develop a shared understanding of how forests will contribute to and be impacted by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as COVID-19 recovery measures. Now, while this shared understanding within the global forest community is critical, realizing the full potential of forests to contribute to the attainment of the SDGs and the objectives of the UN Decade on Ecological Restoration, it requires a lot more. A lot of things have to change. You know, we must understand that we cannot continue to liquidate the world's natural capital, which is represented by our forests, through overexploitation and the disregard of forest long-term values. We need to recognize that business as usual amounts to stealing from future generations. So, how to move ahead? I think it is incumbent upon us to step up our efforts to positively influence decisions made in other sectors, particularly those that are currently driving deforestation and forest degradation. We need to commit ourselves to more effective dialogue and collaboration across sectors and with the public, and to strengthen forest education at all levels. Now, I think there are a number of ways we can use our knowledge and experience to positively influence decisions in these other sectors. For example, by providing convincing evidence to public health authorities and planners that effective conservation and sustainable management of forests and their wildlife can significantly reduce the likelihood of future zoonotic disease outbreaks. But we all have a critical role to play within our own spheres of influence, including the forest science community. In my view, we need to look beyond forests and work very closely with our colleagues across disciplinary and sectoral boundaries, particularly with the agricultural sector, and continue to engage constructively with policymakers, the private sector, and the general public. In closing, I'd just like to say that I believe deeply that the case for forest conservation, sustainable management, and restoration is a very compelling one. Beyond their widely appreciated values for biodiversity conservation and greenhouse gas sequestrations, forests do provide benefits to peoples in so many ways, and we'll be discussing that all week. So I think we have a lot to learn from each other during this Congress, and I hope we will be inspired by what we hear and learn from our colleagues, and that we come away from this Congress energized and able to make new partnerships and bridge the gaps that may have existed before for the benefits of the forests we all love. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing Korea's experience, also really laying out the goals and the roadmap in terms of what we need to aim for in the future. I think one of the things that, in terms of allocating resources, we think about and we know are important are the financial resources, and I think that is maybe the perspective that our final participant may bring. Final for this session, we have Mr. Yannick Glemarek, Executive Director of GCEF, the Green Climate Fund. He has over 30 years of international experience in climate change, development, and finance. And before he joined the GCF, he served as the UN Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director for Policy and Program in UN Women. Mr. Glemarek, how do you see the challenges and what must be done if we are to achieve our goals by 2030?
Thank you very much. Please allow me at the onset to also congratulate the Korea Forest Service and the FAO for organizing this 15th World Forest Congress. I cannot think about a more timely theme than a green, healthy, and resilient future with forest. The forest deforestation and forest degradation are both a cause and a consequence of climate change. The Green Climate Fund at the same time believes that reforestation, forest protection, and sustainable forest management are very powerful solutions to arrest climate change and to achieve the SDGs. Right now, forest deforestation, forest degradation, together with agriculture and land degradation, accounts for about a fifth of the total greenhouse gas emission in the world. Deforestation, forest degradation also dramatically erode our resilience to climate change and actually threaten a global food crisis. On the other hand, if we can turn the tide and protect forests, restore forests, and promote sustainable forest management, it's about 1/3 of the total greenhouse gas emission sequestration that we need in order to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal of the Paris Agreement that could be addressed. And if we can restore our ecosystem, restore our forests, we can also dramatically reduce the impact of extreme weather events associated with climate change, droughts, floods, on people, communities, assets, infrastructure, and livelihood. And if we are speaking also about a healthy future, with forest restoration and sustainable forest management are maybe among the best investment we can think about to foster a green, climate-resilient recovery from the global COVID-19 pandemic. The forest restoration, sustainable forest management create a lot of jobs and new resources immediately. You do not have to wait for 2 or 3 or 4 years. So it's a wonderful economic stimulus measures. Despite the key importance of forest protection to address all this key crisis, right now it's a totally underfinanced sector. According to some estimates, between 2010 and 2017, it's about $20 billion that have been allocated to forest protection, forest restoration, sustainable forest management. Why, to leverage all these opportunities that I've just mentioned to address the combined climate, biodiversity loss, COVID crisis, it's about $200 billion a year that we will need. That means an order of magnitude larger. So what is the Green Climate Fund doing about it? Since the beginning of our operation in 2015, we have allocated about $1.4 billion to a forest project with our partners, about 14% of our resources. $1.4 billion, it's a significant amount, but it's pale compared to the figures I've just mentioned. So what are we trying to do? We are trying to use this money in a highly catalytic manner to shift much, much, much larger financial flow. And we work along 4 main streams. The first stream is basically to promote integrated planning. We want to make sure that we break the silos and that we not only support the development of forest policy, but we also incorporate the role of forests in every single climate strategies, in the national adaptation plan, in every single effort of the government to incorporate forests in policies, in decision making. Right now, GCF is supporting 74 national adaptation plans across the world. And one of our great hopes is that these national adaptation plans will highlight the importance of ecosystem-based approaches to avert catastrophic climate change and increase our resilience. The second thing is that we promote innovation. We promote financial, technological, institutional, policy innovation. And Juan Carlos and I had the opportunity to discuss at COP26 last year. And when it comes to forestry, the local knowledge of indigenous people is unique. And it's certainly one of the greatest source of knowledge that we have to avert catastrophic climate change with forest. And so, for example, we are supporting a $600 million fund for fostering a bioeconomy in the Amazon with local banks. And these funds, managed by the Inter-American Development Bank, will try to provide a fighting chance to communities to come up with new eco-businesses in sustainable tourism, in agroforestry, in native palm cultivation, in non-timber sustainable forest product, and the building on the knowledge of communities. And if these projects prove successful, what we will do is that after we will try to basically develop green bonds that will enable us to reach a size in terms of financing. The third thing is that when we have a solution, we try to, that has proven its worth, we basically try to scale it up by de-risking the first very large investment, to establish a commercial track record. Why is it important? It's because bankers cannot deal with uncertainty, but they can deal with risk, they can price risk. And once you have taken a solution to scale, once you have de-risked a first project, their bankers can start assessing risk. And so, for example, we are supporting a $200 million with the Mitsubishi Bank fund called Arboro Fund to support sustainable forest management that deliver co-benefits and adaptation benefits to communities in Latin America and Africa. If this project is successful, we will have established a track record, and it should be able to move without us. And our last and fourth work stream to try to leverage finance at scale is to strengthen domestic financial institutions. At the end of the day, we are parochial as investors. We tend to invest in the geographies we know, the communities we know, the technologies we know. And so if we want to reach scale for forestry, we have to strengthen domestic financial institutions. And so, for example, over the past 2 years, GCF has financed close to 30 projects for $1.2 billion for the Great Green Wall Initiative in the Sahelin countries. And one of our projects, called eGriffin with IFAD, is to provide credit line to local agricultural banks to support agroforestry at the community level. And so through this different work stream, what we hope is to be able to bring an idea to scale as fast as possible, because time is running short.
Thank you. I think you gave us a very wide aspect of what the GCF is doing in collaboration with various other entities, especially local and other stakeholders in this aspect. I keep looking at my watch because I would really like to maybe go for one more round, but I think we are running out of time. But before we go, though, one quick round of questions. You've all talked about what is at stake and what we are doing. But Mr. Chi, in his opening speech, talked about he wanting specifics from you about what needs to be done. If you could all just give me maybe one specific thing that you think needs to be changed in order to achieve the, and in order for us to play the role that it needs to play in the realization of SDGs, could you tell me? And we'll start off way from in the end from Mr. Paretta, and then work towards me.
Yeah, I think one thing that would really be helpful is for all of us in our own different spheres to inculcate a sense of the longer-term values that forests hold for people. Because I think so many of the decisions that are being made at higher political levels and by planners are based on short-term economic considerations or political expediency. So I think kind of long-term valuation of ecosystem services and natural capital would really send a very positive and necessary message.
Having a long-term perspective. Ms. Yuratna, what would you think?
Thank you. I think it really comes down to what I was mentioning in my original intervention on looking at the whole concept of nothing about us without us, which means having more inclusive governance models moving forward, whether those are governance model at local level, at national level, but essentially at all level of governance, right? For example, Green Climate Fund, Yannick was talking about it recently in 2019, did a whole program on champions, and they were youth champions, for example, that were appointed. That's one way to start. FAO already launched the World Food Forum. The UNFF has a recognized youth constituency, and many other spaces are opening up. So really integrating a multi-stakeholder perspective in the heart of governance, of course, not replacing the governmental decision-making, but making sure it's inclusive and it's bringing people at heart of decision-making is something really, really crucial, and would then automatically benefit the processes that are set ahead straight. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a very important aspect as well. Mr. Glimarek?
I think we need a triple revolution. We need a revolution in the way we value the role of forest. We need a revolution in the way we plan our action for forest, and we need a revolution in the way we finance it. This triple revolution doesn't come from me; it comes from actually the Global Commission on Adaptation. But we need this triple revolution.
And Mr. Carlos?
Pienso que es importante
Yes, as for the indigenous peoples, our rights need to be recognized. That should be the first step. Only then, any projects or initiatives, whether they are about youth or indigenous peoples whatever initiatives or programs will be funded when our rights are recognized. Of course, Western science is important, it's valuable, but when it's combined with the wisdom and traditional knowledge of the indigenous peoples, they will become more effective. Then the international community will be able to enjoy better outcomes. Right now, there are serious challenges faced by the humanity. We need to respond to them immediately. The indigenous peoples, they have had many challenges that they've overcome successfully in the past. Our forests are in crisis, and we need to listen to them.
You aptly point out, and all of you aptly point out, that this is a very complicated and multifaceted area, but if we work together, there's a good opportunity for change. Thank you very much for all of your participation. May I ask you to go back to your seats? And we are then going to get ready for our second panel. Our second panel is oh, yes. Oh, my apologies. Yes. Great round of applause. Our first panel, if we talked about the issue from a slightly more global scale, our second panel will bring us a little bit more down onto the ground. The second panel will be focusing on actions on the ground. Could I ask the second panel to come up onto the stage as well? Yes. Yes, we have our second panel. Our second panel, who are taking their seats, and we can maybe all welcome them with a broad, I think, applause. Our second panel, as they're taking their seats, have been asked to focus their presentations on the questions about what we must do differently. And it's from all of their different perspectives. But the question about what we must do differently, as evidence shows that measures to keep the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees are not sufficient, and that we have seen that environmental deterioration increases the risk, as we have pointed out before, of the risk of zoonotic diseases, as we have seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. So, so that will be the general round of questions. I would like to start off with our hosts on my left. Our host, the Korea's Minister of Korea Forest Service, His Excellency Choi Byung-am. He actually has more than 3 decades of experience in the Korea Forest Service, and he was a Deputy Minister and Director General of the Planning Coordination Bureau before he took the leadership. Could I ask your opinion about how Korea, a lot of people have already talked about Korea's excellent experience, but how Korea has been able to do its part, and maybe what lies in the future for Korea?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. First, on behalf of the host country, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to everyone here for participating in the high-level dialogue. This World Forestry Congress is held for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic. As such, it holds many important meanings. I want to define one of them as hopeful action. As President Moon Jae-in mentioned in his address, currently there are major crises, including climate crisis, ecological crisis, and the health crisis. And in overcoming these challenges, we need to discuss how the forests can play a key role, because forests can provide us with solutions to respond to these challenges, Korea has been utilizing its government-level actions as well as grassroots movements to restore forests and manage them well. And I believe that Korea's experience is a very good example that you can refer to. Even today, as we're speaking, worldwide forests are struggling with degradation because of our survival or human greed. According to the Global Forest Resources Assessment published by FAO last year, 420 million hectares of forests have been lost since 1990. Among them, nearly 90% of forest loss was due to conversion of forests into cropland and agricultural use. Despite the international community's collective efforts and action, the pace of forest loss has not been slowing down. At COP26, held last November in Glasgow, 141 countries agreed upon the need for immediate action to end deforestation. And they signed the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use, but forests are still disappearing. Would it be impossible to improve land productivity for humans' lives and conserve forest resources at the same time? I can say with confidence that the answer is no. Korea is a living testament to this. Until the early and mid-20th century, forests in Korea were severely devastated under the colonial rule and the Korean War. Trees were burned during the war, and then forest degradation and soil loss worsened due to poverty and heavy dependence on forests for fuel wood. Amid the situation, Korea's task was very clear, which was to restore forests back to their former density, as we were also developing our economy. You may think that economic development and forest conservation may not happen at the same time, but we had to restore our forests while promoting economic development. And in order to achieve this very difficult goal, we first had to establish a set of goals and visions, and then we created laws and an institutional system to put them into practice. The Korean government enacted the Forest Protection Act in 1961. At that time, it defined illegal harvesting and illegal wood cutting as one of the 4 social evils and strictly punished them. And at the same time, 5 national forest plans have been made. So this is the national plan for reforestation. And these plans were carefully designed and they were implemented nationwide. About 70% of Korea used to be covered by forests, but half of them were degraded. And to respond to this and to restore these degraded areas, we carried out nationwide afforestation projects. At the time, in the 1960s and 70s, the Korean people were still struggling economically, but we were dedicated to restoring our forests because we believed that reforestation would bring about economic benefits at the same time. And then the Korean government gave substantial authority, including a special judicial law enforcement authority, to the forestry authorities with the belief that forest restoration would be the foundation of national land and power restoration. And the young and old, women and men, they all participated in forest restoration which was the beginning of the Semaul movement or the New Village movement. And from the perspective of forest management administration, you can say that this was an integrated responsibility framework or a forest management system centered around the Korea Forest Service. And this integrated framework was very effective. Then what was the main driving force that enabled Korea to successfully restore forests in such a short period of time? I would like to say that it was due to concerted action between the government and the public. This is the very thing that the international community needs to show the world right now. It may not be difficult, so it is relatively easy to establish plans and announcing them. But the important thing is to implement them and achieve these goals. You need commitment. You need strong dedication. You also need to stay committed to achieving these goals, and monitoring and keep tracking of the progress is crucial. I had the opportunity to attend COP26 last November in the UK. At the leader session on forest and land use, Prime Minister Boris Johnson conveyed his wishes that the forest sector, which accounts for 30% of climate change, will become a permanent fixture of future summits on climate change. Likewise, forests can contribute to addressing climate change and related problems such as poverty, famine, and biodiversity loss. Forests are key to nature-based solutions. They also play an important role in achieving the SDGs by 2030. Therefore, I argue that forests, messianism, or forests can save our planet Earth. But the most important thing is action on the ground. There are scattered declarations and pledges and NDCs for carbon reductions. These need to be implemented on-site, on the ground, in an organized and coordinated manner. Action on the ground, only such action can change our future. Korea has already achieved reforestation, but now it has its own challenges and goals. We are committed to decreasing 40% of greenhouse gases until 2030 compared to the level of 2018. And this has been reflected in the Act on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth to cope with the climate crisis that was enacted in September last year. Also, in December last year, the Korea Forest Service finalized 2050 carbon neutral strategy of the forest sector. And to implement this strategy, once again, we need an integrated forest management framework that we used to have in the 1960s and 70s. This is, again, an integrated framework to manage our forest resources in a coherent and integrated manner. We need to build a system that tends and use forests in a circular manner to achieve a sustainable forest management and contribute to sustainable development at the national level. Korea was once a less developed country, but now it has become an advanced nation, and it has had successful economic development, and it has also a successful track record of restoration, forest restoration. Therefore, Korea will actively participate in the international community, and we will play our role in facilitating global action. We have accumulated extensive experience of forest restoration. We're going to share that with developing countries so that we can contribute to the global effort to respond to climate change. Also, we're going to collaborate with various international organizations, including FAO, AFOCO, GCF, and GGGI. Korea has fostered bilateral relations with 37 countries in the forest sector. Such bilateral cooperation began in Southeast Asia, but it has expanded to Central Asia, Latin America, and the African continent. Now, we have bilateral cooperation programs underway to restore forests in the dry land in the Gobi Desert and secure technology and data on forest restoration. And we are going to continue to work with Congo Basin area and the Amazon area to improve the quality of life of indigenous people. Korea will invest capital and technology to restore and protect forests in these regions. A famous French writer in the 18th century said that forest precedes man and desert follows him. I hope that this phrase will deliver a message to the future generation that our civilization will exist only when it is with the forest. The forest is part of our mother nature that embraces all of us, as well as all living creatures on earth. Now is a time for us to take action to restore the forest. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Che. You lay out a wide range of experiences that Korea has gone through, especially experiences on the ground. But I'm sure, having been with the Korea Forest Service for 30 years, you yourself actually embody what actions have been taken by the Korea Forest Service over the past 30 years. I hope we have time later on in the Congress for you to be able to share this kind of experience with everybody else. Next, we head to the private sector, who's also corporation we cannot do without, especially in the area of the private-public dialogue area. We have with us Mr. Kim Jun. He is SK Group's president of Green Business Committee. He is also the vice president and CEO of SK Innovation. As you might know, the SK Group, not only being one of Korea's biggest groups, but has been a very leader in the area of climate change, ESG, environmental sectors. So we're pleased to have Mr. Kim with us today. Could you also share with us what the private sector role could be on the ground?
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. We continue to talk about net zero by 2050. Will we be able to achieve this goal? Many believe that it would be very difficult to achieve net zero by 2050. And at the Davos Forum, the UN Secretary General also talked about how there are limits to the government working alone, and that is why we need the active participation of the private sector, in particular companies. In response to climate change, this really is the mission for our generation. This is a common responsibility for our generation, and I think this recognition not only exists within the government but also in the private sector. If we take a look at action by the government, it's mostly related to regulations. But we need to go beyond regulation. We need to make sure that the government facilitates the activities of the private sector through incentives. I believe that incentives would be the more effective tool. From the corporate side, we have to conduct risk management concerning regulations, but we need to take a step beyond that. We need to make sure that we become proactive in responding to climate change for the very survival of our companies. We need to have this change in mindset, and only when there is a change in mindset can we have a change in action. If we have the recognition to be proactive in climate change, then we can come up with bold goals beyond what is necessitated by the regulations. And if we have these bold goals, then we will make an effort to find possible solutions. If we take a look at some technical breakthroughs, you can see that the speed of breakthroughs has become much faster. And we can also accelerate the shift towards eco-friendly portfolios. From that aspect, I do believe that we need a change in mindset on the part of the corporate sector. Having said that, SK Group in 2021, in particular June of 2021, all companies within the group had declared our goal to achieve net zero before 2050, and some companies even declared a bold goal of achieving net zero by 2030. In July of 2021, SK Group has achieved 200 billion tons of carbon dioxide emission reduction, which is 1% of the total net zero goal by 2050. So we will shoulder the burden of 1%. In order to realize these ambitious goals, we will not only work on technical breakthroughs, but the whole group will be shifting to become green. Because we are here at the World Forestry Congress, what are our roles related to forestry? We have SK Innovis within the SK Group, and this company has played a role in afforestation for the last half a century. In the future, we will be working on forest-based carbon credit exchange systems. Our goal is to make sure that by 2050, we contribute to the reduction of 200 million tons, and we hope that 10% of that will come through afforestation. And if we are to effectively achieve these goals, we need to apply scientific methods to afforestation. AI and BT are some of the advanced technologies that we need to utilize. At the same time, we need to combine drone and satellite as well as data so that we can enhance the productivity of forestry cycles through accurate information and data. We also need to make sure that we establish world-class credit systems. Through these efforts, from the corporate perspective, we do hope that we can proactively contribute to the mission at hand, and we hope to show you some tangible results. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You do bring in some interesting aspects, technology, as well as the other financial aspects of it. Thank you very much. Next, we have the representative from the Republic of Congo, Her Excellency Ms. Rosalie Matondo. She's the Minister of Forest Economy. Minister Matondo, your perspectives on what needs to be done on the ground to achieve our goal?
Merci beaucoup pour la parole. Avant de commencer.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Before I begin, I would like to express my congratulations to FAO and the government of the Republic of Korea. Thank you for organizing this World Forestry Congress despite many challenges. I would also like to thank you for your hospitality and all the support that you have provided to us so that we can be here in person. First, let me talk about the Congo Basin. As for this area, we have been adopting nature-based solutions. There was COP26 held in Glasgow, and over there we expressed our views at the COP26. As for these indigenous forests, we need to protect them. These are special and very valuable forests that have not been degraded. and we have many such native forests in the Congo Basin region. So we've been carrying out various efforts, including REDD+ project. Preserving the tropical forests is crucial for our effort to respond to climate change, and also through reforestation we can capture carbon, and we can also help many indigenous tribes in this region. More than 80% of their income come from the forests. Therefore, on the ground, we need to pursue very specific actions. There was another panel member from the Amazon region mentioned that there are these indigenous peoples living in the mountains and the forests, and they maintain their livelihoods utilizing the forest resources. And for them, it is impossible to maintain their way of living without the forests. In this context, we need to build a better financing mechanism. Also, we can utilize various funding organizations such as GCF. When we can absorb more carbon in the forested areas, this will benefit the entire humanity by helping us cope with the climate change. Therefore, we need to change our perspective on forests. Then let me give you some more details about the Republic of Congo. Our country is one of the 10 countries located in the Congo Basin, and we have more than 25 million hectares of forests. And when we think about the percentage of degradation, it's quite low at 0.6%. Our country has been working hard to preserve our forests, but at the same time, in our country, we have the national plan to stop forest degradation. We have also been trying to restore about 1 million hectares of forest. And we have a panel member from GCF. We've been receiving support from the GCF as well. And thanks to such support, we were able to continue to manage and restore 14 million hectares of forests together with the local communities. As was mentioned by the minister from Korea, we need to forge better partnerships. We need to learn from best practices of other countries and apply them in our country. And also, we have accumulated 20 years of experience in terms of forest management and conservation. So we would like to share our experiences with you as well when it comes to restoration and afforestation and efforts to stop degradation of forests. So I hope to build stronger partnerships with all of you at this Congress. It could be bilateral partnerships and also partnerships with international organizations. We need better partnerships because we need to respond to climate change and forest-related challenges together. We should stop just talking about these, but we should start putting them into action. And only then such action will lead to better results. I'd like to urge all of you to join hands together to overcome these crises. There are many challenges that are threatening our survival, so we need to work together. Thank you.
Definitely a call to action by our minister from Congo. There's no other place that you could actually think about in terms of action on the ground than Congo and one of the various countries that are based on the Congo Basin. And it really calls into play that it must be a coordinated effort by everyone so that deforestation is reversed and forests are preserved for the future. which heads us into our next speaker, who again is representative of the future generation, as well as indigenous communities. We have Ms. Jessica Vega Ortega, co-chair of the Global Indigenous Youth Caucus. She is from the indigenous Mixteco people in Mexico. She studied political science and public administration at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. Ms. Ortega, again, I think we would love to hear from you about what you think, what kind of actions need to be taken on the ground.
Duba di Quindo, está y esna y. Saludos, hermanas y hermanos.
Thank you very much. Greetings, brothers and sisters. As a young indigenous person, and as someone who has lived in the city, thank you very much for allowing me to share my opinions with you. And it is a great pleasure to be invited to the World Forestry Congress co-hosted by KFS and FAO. We have all been inconvenienced in the past, and so I continue to share my opinions about the youth and the women. I believe that women and youth need to raise our voices using opportunities as the Congress that we are at today. We have not always earned the attention that we should have for our voices. We are all faced with crisis, COVID-19, climate change, environmental degradation, as well as invasions into our land. We call this the virus of invasion. We have conducted mega projects in various communities, and we cannot even vaccinate ourselves against mega projects that are being conducted in our communities. The indigenous communities, we all call ourselves brothers and sisters. And so we need to make sure that we respond together because we are from the same motherland and the sun, which is our father, and we share the same ecosystem and the same environment. In order for us to continue our lives, we need to share our rights and we need to become one. We should not become fragmented, but rather we need to become one to dream of a sustainable future together. We need to make sure that the youth plays our role at the center. We need to become the central part of the present. There are so many problems that we are faced with. In particular, due to the pandemic, many of the challenges that we are faced with have been aggravated. Many different international dialogues, such as the Paris Treaty, should be respected, and we need to make efforts together. And only then will we be able to respect the land that we live in. And furthermore, we need to remember that forests are not just the land where trees are. We should not just think about this land for just afforestation. But what we need to do is to remember that we have borrowed this land from our future generation to use. And so our indigenous communities are always ready to protect and safeguard our motherland. And we are also ready to find new innovations within nature. We need to utilize these innovations to have harmony with Mother Earth. And we need to make sure that we achieve equality in the way of our life. We have always made these efforts, and therefore this helps us understand the current and predict and prepare for the future pandemics to come. For the indigenous communities, freedom is very important, and we also believe that if there are any changes to be made on our land, we would like to have prior notice of these changes so that we can work on safeguarding biodiversity, life, and forest, because forest in itself is life. And so therefore, we need to make sure that we have laws and regulations in place to discipline those who do not protect our forest, because we must work on environmental protection together. This is a responsibility that falls on all of us. We need to make sure that we gather in solidarity to fight against environmental degradation, and we need to make sure that we have a recognition that indigenous communities can contribute. Thank you.
I think we heard very loudly your call for unity in terms of our approach to this very important issue. Finally, we have the representative from Mongolia, Mr. Baterdin Baturzi, the Minister of Environment and Tourism of Mongolia. You are going to talk about how Mongolia has been able to tackle this issue and is currently in the process of tackling this issue. Minister?
Юуны өмнө дэлхийн ойн 15 дугаар конгрессийг зохион байгуулж байгаа бүгд найрамдах Солонгос улсын засгийн газарт талархал илэрхийлье. Мөн одоо бид бүхэнтэй хамт панелистаар оролцож байгаа сайд нар болон төлөөлөгчдөө мэнд хүргэе. Тэгээ манай орны хувьд бол уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлт маш идэвхтэй явагдаж байгаа орнуудын нэг. Ялангуяа сүүлийн 80 жилд бол дэлхийн дундчтай харьцуулахад агаарын дундаж температурын хэмжээ бол 2 дахин илүү буюу 225 хэмээр нэмэгдсэн. За жилийн нийлбэр хурд унц бол 7.3%-аар буурснаас бол тодорхой харж болно. Уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийн нөлөөр манай улсад цаг агаарын гаралтай байгалийн гамшигт үзэгдлийн давтамж 2 дахин нэмэгдэж, гол мөрөн хурдцтай ширгэж, мөнх цэвдэг сүүлийн 50 гаруй жилийн хугацаанд бол 30 гаруй%-аар хумигдсан. За мөн хөрс бэлчээр дөрөтөн цөлжих байгаль цагуурын аюулт үзэгдлийн давтамж хамрах хүрээ бол нэмэгдсээр байгаа гэсэн таагүй мэдээг бас дуулахад тийм байна. Монгол Улсын засгийн газраас шин сэргэлтийн бодлогыг боловсруулан хэрэгжүүлж эхлээд байгаа. Энэхүү бодлогын нэг бүрэлдэхүүн хэсэг нь бол ногоон хөгжлийн сэргэлтийн бодлого. За энэ хүрээнд бол уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтийг сааруулах, цөлжилт газрын дөрөөдлийг бууруулах, ойн сан нэмэгдүүлэхэд бодиттой хувь нэмэр оруулах, тэр бумад үндэсний хөдөлгөөнийг хэрэгжүүлэх, усны нөөцийг хамгаалж хүн амын баталгаат ундны усаар хангах, говийн бүс нутгийн усан хангамжийг нэмэгдүүлэх, экологи эдийн засгийн ач холбогдолтой хөхмөр төсөл, орчны бохирдлыг бууруулах, энгийн болон аюултай хогийн эдлийн төвлөрсөн байгууламж байгуулах зэрэг хөгжлийн төслүүдийг хэрэгжүүлэхээр төлөвлөн ажиллаад байгаа. Монгол Улсын ерөнхийлөгч Ухнагийн хөрс нэгдсэн үндэсний байгууллагын ерөнхий ассамблеийн энэ дээрээс цөлжилтийг сааруулах, хүлэмжийн шингээлтийг нэмэгдүүлэх зорилгоор тэр бумаар тоологдох модыг тарьж ургуулах санаачлагыг гаргаж уг хөдөлгөөн бол Монгол улс даяар өрнөд байгаа. Монгол улс тэр бумад үндэсний хөдөлгөөнийг хэрэгжүүлснээр уур амьсгалын өөрчлөлтөд дасан зохицох, хүлэмжийн шингээлтийг нэмэгдүүлэх, цөлжилт газрын дөрөөдлийг бууруулахаас гадна дэлхийд ховор тооцогдох эмийн ургамал, амтан, биологийн төрөл зүйлээ хамгаалан үржүүлж, ногоон эдийн засгийг дэмжих замаар эмийн ургамал тармилжуулах, бүтээгдэхүүн үйлдвэрлэх, за агро ойн аж ахуйг хөгжүүлэх, жимсгэн тариалах, мод үржүүлэх, бортох бордоо, ургамал хамгааллын бодис усчуултын систем болон хог аяглыг боловсруулах үйлдвэр байгуулах зэрэг олон төрлийн дагалдах үйлдвэр аж ахуйг хөгжүүлэх нь COVID-19 цардахлын дараа иргэдийг ажлын байраар хангах амжиргааг дэмжих боломжуудыг бий болгоод байна. Монгол оронд байгалийн нөөцийг ашиглаж буй уул уурхайн томоохон компаниуд тэр бумад үндэсний хөдөлгөөний хүрээнд 680 сая модыг өөрсдийн хөрөнгөөр тарьж ургуулах амлалтыг авсан. Мөн Монгол улсад байгаа санхүүгийн байгууллагууд бол нийтдээ 88.6 сая модыг бас тарьж ургуулах ийм амлалтыг аваад хэрэгжүүлж эхлээд байна. Мөн иргэд аж ахуйн нэгжүүд энэхүү хөдөлгөөнд идэвхтэй оролцож тэр бумад үндэсний хөдөлгөөнийг хэрэгжүүлэхэд улс орнууд, олон улсын байгууллагуудын туршлага хамтын ажиллагаа чухлыг онцлон тэмдэглэж та бүхнийг бас бидэнтэй хамтран ажиллахыг Монгол Улсын засгийн газрын өмнөөс бас уриалж байна. 남우가 없어지면 인간이
Without trees, there will be no more humans. We need to cultivate forest for our humanity. Thank you.
Korean is excellent, we have to say. I wish we had more time to delve into all of the important aspects that all of you have brought forth, but unfortunately, we are out of time, and we have a lot of issues, a lot of discussions that must be continued throughout the week. So I think we must end our session for today. I would like to thank all of our participants for the first session. Our panelists who are up here now, who were up here before, I believe our wonderful panelists have really set the stage for the entire Congress. I hope we were able to inspire all of you to take what has been discussed here and apply all of your collective energy and wisdom to come up with ways to truly build a green, healthy, and resilient future with forests. So have a great rest of the conference, and I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you.